Number 10, mass murderer. On February 17, 2020, 50-year-old Jamie Covarrubias Espendola, 38-year-old Jose Maria Aguiar Espejel, and 28-year-old Rodrigo Aguiar Espello were found dead with gunshot wounds in the back of their heads at the Paris Valley Cemetery in California. The three men had visited the site to pay respects to their old friend Uver Hernandez Castañeda. Little did they know it would also become their final resting place. 4 men entered the cemetery, but only one made it out alive. The survivor became the primary suspect of the killings since no one else was at the scene during that time. That man was named Jose Luis Torres Garcia, a 33-year-old Mexican national who fled the crime scene, leaving his vehicle behind. Police found over 15 pounds or just under 7 kilograms of marijuana inside his car, and they also saw that Garcia had been living in the United States illegally and had already been deported from the country twice. Police also said these killings were meant to send a message, which led to panic in the town of Paris, with people believing the Mexican drug cartel might be involved. The killings were described as being, quote, execution style. Garcia was eventually arrested 10 days after the shootings and was charged with 3 counts of murder, jailed in the Laramie County Detention Center, and if convicted, he could spend the rest of his life in prison. Number 9, murder of James Taylor. On May 28, 2022, police officers found a seriously injured man inside the Mount Olivet Cemetery in Raleigh, California. 69-year-old James Taylor was bleeding and on the brink of death. Authorities came to the cemetery after a 911 caller said that there were 3 suspicious individuals hopping over a fence. The man, James Taylor, died later that same night. After investigating, police found a bloody trail that led to a pile of clothes supposedly belonging to the suspects. It's believed that the suspects had, quote, messed around either before or after attacking Taylor. The next day, 18-year-old Maria Elizabeth Peña Echevarria was arrested by Raleigh police in connection to the murder. She was unfazed by the arrest and stared blankly into the camera for her mugshot with her face and neck tattoos in full view. 3 days later, 19-year-old Jonathan Dan Villanueva Galer was also arrested. Jonathan had an extensive criminal history and was out on probation. It's believed that he may have been the leader behind the incident. Another arrest was made of a 16-year-old boy whose name was withheld because he's a minor. Maria's friend said the murder happened because the 2 boys were trying to impress her. She does not believe her friend would be capable of such an act. The 3 teens were charged with first-degree murder and are currently being held at the Wake County Detention Center. If convicted, they could be sentenced to death according to North Carolina law. Even though this seems like a random murder, Raleigh police believe this was a calculated act. Only time will tell what the truth really is. Number 8, FBI dig. On September 13, 2022, the FBI arrived at the North Burial Ground in Smithfield, Virginia, to exhume a body that had been buried for 30 years. The grave marked 6548 belonged to an unknown man who was buried in 1992. His identity and the nature of his death was unknown, but the FBI believes he may have been the victim of a murder plot from 3 decades ago. What's even more interesting is that something very similar happened back in 2016. That year, the body of Stephen DeSaro was exhumed from the same cemetery. DeSaro was buried there in 1993, but once his body was exhumed, it was discovered that he had actually been murdered. An 85-year-old man nicknamed Cadillac Frank was deemed responsible. Frank was an ex-mafia boss from the La Cosa Nostra organization. He admitted to murdering DeSaro to stop him from talking to the cops. This investigation also revealed that the North Burial Ground in Smithfield was a hotspot for criminal organizations looking to hide bodies. It was the perfect location, since it was created as a free burial spot for poor individuals. Most bodies were buried there without any questions asked, and Frank may have also been involved in the murder of a man from grave 6548. The cemetery is no longer in use, with the last burial happening in 2013. But no one knows just how many murder victims were buried there. Frank is now 89 and is currently serving a life sentence at USP Hazleton facility in West Virginia. Number 7, Antioch murder. On September 19, 2016, police in Smith County, Texas responded to a 911 call about a body found in the Antioch Cemetery. The body belonged to 62-year-old Luis Martinez. He was completely burned to a crisp and left to rot in a burn pile. Authorities believe that this may have been the suspect's attempt at hiding the body, not knowing the charred remains of Martinez would still be present. Hours after Luis was found, Rebecca Bond, a 37-year-old woman, and Laurie Perry, a 56-year-old woman, were arrested. Rebecca Bond was in a relationship with the victim, and according to Laurie Perry, Bond shot Martinez in the back inside his own home, then took him to the cemetery where someone else burned the body. A few days later, a third suspect emerged when police arrested 52-year-old Stanton Lane Pierce. It's believed that Bond may have been having an affair with Pierce, who cleaned up the crime scene inside Martinez's home and tried to hide the body. In September of 2017, Laurie Perry was convicted of tampering with evidence and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Rebecca Bond and Stanton Lane Pierce were charged with first-degree murder, and they were both given 40 years in prison. Would you rather spend the night alone in a cemetery or be sick for a week? Tell us which would be worse in the comments below and hit that subscribe button while you're at it. Number 6. Springfield shootings. On January 21, 2022, police officers responded to a call that reported an alleged shooting incident in Springfield, Missouri. Once police came to the scene, they found the bodies of two men, 38-year-old Mark D. Young and 46-year-old Justin S. Baker. Other than the caller, there are no witnesses present at the cemetery, and police ruled out the caller as a suspect. For the next few months, they started an investigation into the lives of these men. They eventually found out that they knew each other and were quite close. In fact, there was sufficient evidence to suggest that the two may have been living together. On July 12, 2022, Springfield police announced that they determined the incident was a case of murder-suicide. They didn't reveal any more details like who shot whom, but so far, they haven't come up with any evidence of a third person being involved in the case. Murder-suicides are very common among lovers, close friends, and family members. It's likely that a personal dispute led to this incident, and as far as the case goes, it remains open, but it's unlikely the police will release any further details out of respect for the families involved. Number 5. Visit Gone Wrong. On March 24, 2022, Yolanda Ngogia, a 52-year-old Texas woman, was shot and killed while visiting her son at the Calvary Baptist Church Garden of Memory Cemetery in Killeen, Texas. She was there to visit him for his first birthday in heaven, but unfortunately ended up meeting him another way. There was also another unnamed victim at the scene who suffered minor injuries from the shooting. Yolanda's ex-husband, Kene Ngogia, posted an update on Facebook saying, quote, "His kids will never be the same, and this is the stuff you see in movies, but it has become our life." On August 14, 2022, 17-year-old Christian Lamar Weston was arrested in connection with Yolanda's murder. The police didn't release any details about whether or not Weston would contest the murder charge, but they confirmed he is being held without bond. A few days later, 20-year-old Demario Jabbar Moore was also arrested as an additional suspect. He is currently being held at the Bell County Jail on $1 million bond. It seems like Christian Lamar Weston may be the primary suspect, since he is being held without bond. Texas law allows 17-year-olds to be charged as adults, and if convicted, Weston would likely be sentenced to either life in prison or death. His young age may prevent a death sentence, but due to the horrific nature of the shooting, death sentence isn't completely out of the question for him. Number 4. Veteran shooting. On July 22, 2022, Randall Coomer, a 38-year-old retired Marine veteran, was shot down in the Sharp Cemetery in Daleville, Indiana. The incident happened after a group of young men and women flipped off Coomer's wife and nearly hit her with their car. She later went home and told her husband about the whole situation. The group, comprised of Alexander Giese, 18, Brandy Circle, 31, Ryan Giese, 22, and Dawn Shatner, 53, later went over to a nearby cemetery to, quote, celebrate a birthday, and it was here that Coomer decided to track them down to confront them. His wife then called him since she was concerned for his safety, but in the middle of the call she heard gunshots and was immediately alerted. As Stephanie Coomer made her way to the cemetery, she witnessed the group leaving and once again flipping her off. Once she got there, it was already too late. She found her husband lying dead in a pool of his own blood. The suspects were arrested a few days later and confessed to the police. After some questioning, murder charges were officially filed against 18-year-old Alexander Giese on August 4, 2022. The remaining 4 were charged with obstruction of justice. Giese faces up to 65 years in prison if he is fully convicted, while his accomplices will only face up to 6 years each. Number 3. Gang War. On June 2, 2022, the funeral procession of Deshante King, a 37-year-old man that was shot dead by police for violating a traffic stop, was happening at the Graceland Cemetery in Racine County. The police claim King was a member of a dangerous gang, and this became more evident at the funeral. During the procession, 19-year-old Lamarion Blair fired shots at the mourners, most of whom belonged to the same gang King was in. Blair allegedly belonged to a rival gang, and his objective was to wreak havoc at the funeral and send a message. Thankfully, no one was killed, but Blair was quickly arrested by the Racine County Police, who charged him with 49 felonies. This included 23 counts of felony first-degree reckless endangering safety as a party to a crime, 25 counts of bail jumping, and 1 felony count of possession of a firearm by an agitated juvenile. The police also managed to match the firearm held by Blair to numerous fatal shootings shootings in the area. It's believed that more charges will be filed after another investigation is finished. Blair is currently awaiting trial for the cemetery shooting, and a $1 million bond has been set for him. If convicted, he could spend the rest of his life behind bars. Number 2. Execution. On May 8, 2020, 86-year-old veteran Paul Marino and his 85-year-old wife Linda Marino were visiting their son's grave at the Delaware Veterans Memorial Cemetery. The couple had visited over 1,000 times since he passed away from cerebral palsy in 2017, but this regular visit took an unexpected turn. The elderly couple was shot down by 29-year-old Sheldon C. Francis, who then quickly left the cemetery and escaped to a wooded area nearby. The Marinos were pronounced dead at the hospital shortly after their bodies were discovered. Police immediately began a manhunt for Francis after they learned what happened, and about 6 hours after the shooting, Sheldon was found dead in the woods from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Police said they weren't sure why Francis shot the couple. They believe he may have been trying to rob them, but after seeing that he was getting chased by police and there was no way out of this, he decided to end his life instead of facing the consequences of his actions. Since the primary suspect of the shooting was dead and there were no other accomplices, no charges were filed against anyone for the murders. Francis also didn't belong to a gang or criminal organization either. The elderly couple had visited their son's grave every single day since he passed. It was almost like a routine for them, and little did they know that one day it would also cost them their lives. Number 1. Headstone accident. In October 2021, Elvira Navarro, a 53-year-old mother of 5, was tending to the graves at Baron Hirsch Cemetery where she worked. She was there with her son Anthony Rosales, and it was just a regular day for her until, well, it wasn't. While she was up close to one of the graves, the massive headstone came crashing down on her head, crushing her skull almost completely. Shortly after the incident, Navarro's son Anthony Rosales, who also worked at the site, sued the cemetery for, quote, causing, permitting, and allowing the cemetery to become and remain in a dangerous, hazardous, trap-like condition. He also claimed to suffer from severe mental trauma after witnessing his mother get crushed to death by a gravestone. He believes that he, too, could have been a victim of the hostile work environments present at the cemetery. A spokesperson for the site, Rabbi Andrew Schultz, claimed that he was devastated to hear the news. Rosales claimed an unspecified amount in damages, and the cemetery may also face charges from OSHA and other authorities. The lawsuit is currently still ongoing, awaiting trial at the Supreme Court of Manhattan. Thanks for watching. Would you visit a cemetery after this? What's the most shocking thing you've ever seen in a cemetery? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time on The Bad Badger.